I'm Sam Roberts of the New York Times, and welcome to the New York Times Close-Up. It was the high-profile case that made headlines. Teenager Martin Tankleff was wrongfully convicted of killing his parents until someone looked at his case that helped to exonerate him. We'll talk about that in a few moments, but first we'll get an update from one of the city's oldest good government groups with Betsy Gotbaum of Citizens Union. It started in 1897, if I'm right, and by 1908 became nonpartisan. I didn't realize it was a political party in the very beginning. Now, Betsy, you're the executive director of Citizens Union. What's on the agenda? What's at the top of your list of what you want to accomplish?
Well, right now, we're very interested in the election of the city council, which is occurring in June. The entire city council is up for re-election. There are really only 5 or 6 competitive races, and we have analyzed those. We've interviewed the candidates. This is what we do, and then we're going to make recommendations as to whom we think people should vote for. One of the first things I want to emphasize is, though, people have got to understand how important the city council is. It really is. It's the first line of getting anything done in this city for people. If you want to get your garbage picked up, or you want more police in your area, you've got to get involved with the city council. You have a council person who has an office somewhere near where you live, and you can call and you can ask them to help you get things that you need. It's so important. I know people who don't even have a clue who their city council person is.
Why is turnout in elections, in local elections in particular, so low, and civic engagement is so low, and people's complaint level is so high? Yeah.
Well, I think that one of the reasons, and that's another project of ours, is we should have municipal elections on the even years, the same years as the president and the governor. All of those elections should be clopped together because more people would vote in them. Mm-hmm. And guess what? You would increase voter turnout. And it is another big project of ours that we are trying very hard. It's going to take a long time to get even year elections on the books, in the books, and have that done. And there's another reason why, because another project of ours is to try to reform the Board of Election. And the Board of Election would be much more
That seems almost hopeless.
I know, but it isn't hopeless. Nothing is hopeless in this city. It's almost hopeless, but it's run really on a political basis by the bosses. And we've got to try to change that a little bit and get it more professional and get more professional people in there to work. I think it's beginning to a little bit, but that's one of the reasons, because the Board of Elections is too busy well, it wouldn't be so busy if you had all the elections in the same year, and you'd save money, and that's important for New Yorkers, right?
Yeah, it seems the Board of Elections isn't a problem of ballot stuffing or anything like that, but it is certainly has a history of incompetence.
Yes, inefficiency and incompetence, and it would be better if you had professionals who are really concerned about making sure that more people vote in New York and making sure the ballots are ready and all of that. So those are 2 big projects of ours.
Betsy, what about nonpartisan elections in the city? That has been suggested at various times. It's been proposed in city charter changes. Does that make sense? I mean, we have essentially a one-party system, or have a Democratic Party that predominates in New York. Would it make more sense to have nonpartisan elections?
It probably would, but and as head of the Citizens Union, I have to say, yes, nonpartisan elections would be a more efficient way to run elections. Personally, I'm saying no comment.
And what about ranked voting? We've tried that now at least once. Does that seem to have worked effectively?
It does seem to have worked, and all the people, the naysayers who said that the citizens won't get it and they won't be able to understand it. People understood it and they liked it, and they did rank the candidates, and I thought it was a much more effective way of getting more people involved and more people elected. I think it's good, and I think it was good.
One thing that I've been particularly concerned about, and we've talked about this a number of times, is the decrease in local news coverage in the city. Do people not care anymore about local news? I mean, we remember there was a time when certainly the local newspapers covered local news more thoroughly, and it seemed that we could hold local officials a lot more accountable. Now, I don't have the sense that that is true anymore. Why is that?
Well, I don't really know. I mean, I don't understand why some of the newspapers in this town do not, the newspapers, the ones that you can hold in your hand, which is what I read, they don't. The Daily News, I have to give them kudos. They cover the news, the local news in New York City extremely well and efficiently. And that's a very important thing for people to know. But most of the news comes on the digital, online. Unfortunately, I'm not so good at reading stuff online. But there is a lot of good information coming out of online newspapers. There is. But a lot of people, certainly people of a certain age, are not so used to doing everything online. It's easier online, I guess, but I find online, which my husband reads, he misses a lot of things. I get a lot of information from the Daily News and a lot of information from the Post, but my husband does not get that same news from reading things online. It's interesting. So I don't know the answer. Listen, you're in the media.
I know. There's so many other online sources too, but I'm not sure how many people read them. I'm not sure if they have the impact that the newspapers did at one time. One of the other things that you see when your late husband, Victor Gotbaum, was running the union is the diffusion of power in New York. We remember the days when Ed Shanahan in New York Magazine used to rank the 10 most powerful New Yorkers. Victor was often among those. Power seems to have become much more diffuse, that you would have a tough time thinking of the 10 most powerful New Yorkers now. Globalization has made corporate leaders, even bankers, have less of a stake in the city. People institutionally seem to have had less power now. Can you get things done anymore by putting 10 people in a room?
Well, I don't know about the answer to that question. I don't think you can get anything done with 10 people. I think you better have 2 people or 3 people.
Or 100 people.
Well, yeah, and then one person could sneak out and be the most powerful. I really believe that back in the 70s, when a lot of the bankers in New York were so involved with what was going on in New York City, they aren't involved anymore in New York City. I mean, the wonderful people at the Municipal Assistance Corporation, and Lou Preston, Felix Rowan, Victor, this whole group of people who work together to save the city. I don't see that anymore. I don't know why. I don't understand it. I guess the banks and the financial people are much more interested in the global. But I'm still so interested in local. And local. And I wish Mayor Adams the best, because I think he can bring the city back. And if anybody tells me New York is dead, it's thriving. You can't get a reservation at Starbucks. Well, you can't get there anyway.
Right, but you can order in advance. You were public advocate. You had a long agenda of things you wanted to do for the city. What's on the agenda of Citizens Union right now?
Well, the most important thing for us is getting elections in even years. That's going to be a long-term project. Another project of ours that is really important is to do something about scaffolding in this city. And we have been able to work with the Borough President of Manhattan, Mark Levine, who's terrific, and several council people. And we hope that the mayor will come along. We think he will, with his new buildings commissioner, who's wonderful, Jimmy Otto. And we're all going to work together to try to make some changes in the scaffolding law, because the city is a mess because of the scaffolding.
Between sidewalk sheds and the scaffolding,
Yeah.
everything seems to be enveloped in...
Exactly, and you can't find the entrance to a building because of the scaffolding. And so there's some things that can be done. I think there's some bills that the city council is going to introduce after the budget, which will change some of the timing on the scaffolding. So that's something that's a big project of ours. Police accountability is another big project of ours. We're very concerned about the fact that the CCRB, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, nobody seems to be listening to their recommendations, and that bothers us. So we're working very hard on trying to make enough noise so that the CCRB, when they make recommendations on how to deal with officers who are not doing the right thing, how to give them more power.
We have tinkered a lot with the city charter over the years. We had major city charter change back in the late 80s, the elimination of the Board of Estimate, which probably most of our viewers don't even remember, empowering the city council. That was the resultant part of a United States Supreme Court decision that Richard Emery was instrumental in winning. Is the city governed better now than it was then?
Oh boy, that's a very hard question to answer. I think it is. I think it's more fair. I think that the city council is really amazing. There are more women in the city council than ever. And I think that changes the whole tenor of the way the city is governed.
How?
I think they're more humane. I think they're more interested in getting things done and doing things better. That's women. I'm sorry. I know I'm going to be pilloried for this. Adrienne Adams, the speaker, is terrific, and I think that there are very different people in the city council than even when I was presiding as public advocate. And I think it's very healthy because you're beginning to hear from the very different pockets all over the city. Remember, there's a big election in June. All the city council is turning over. And it's important that people get out and vote. They probably won't, but we're trying to say, please, we want to change that, even year elections, so that more people will vote. That's a very important project of ours. And as I said, police accountability, very important. The scaffolding, clean up this city. And I think we will be beginning to see that because so many people are working together on it, which is good.
Thanks to Betsy Gotbaum, the Executive Director of Citizens Union, for joining us. And coming up next, a recent article in the New York Times about a man who helped exonerate Martin Tankleff, a convicted murderer. It was the story that made headlines. 19-year-old Martin Tankleff, convicted of killing his wealthy parents in 1990, sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. He maintained his innocence. It was Jay Salpeter, a former New York City police detective turned private investigator, instrumental in cracking the high-profile case that helped exonerate Martin Tankleff almost 2 decades later in 2007. What happened to Salpeter since then? The subject of a recent article in the New York Times titled, "He Freed an Innocent Man from Prison. It Ruined His Life." We're joined by Ed Shanahan, who wrote that article in the New York Times. He's a reporter and editor on the Metropolitan Desk. Ed, a fascinating story involving both figures, a story of the cost of good intentions. What happened to the two figures?
Well, so it was a lengthy reinvestigation that Jay Salpeter did, 7 years approximately it took. In the course of that, they became pretty close, as you can imagine, developed a bond of sorts, and then maintained that bond for a time after the exoneration, after Marty left prison. But eventually they had a falling out. And the falling out was part of a sort of a downward spiral, or whether it was a precursor to it or part of what happened to Jay. His life sort of went sideways. He had accomplished a great thing. He wasn't really able to repeat that success, and then a lot of trouble happened after that, and subsequently he found himself desperate for money and hounding Marty Tankleff.
It's a riveting story, and it's a story, as you said, a story about two human beings. What happened after a great event, someone exonerated after being convicted of murdering his parents. Tankleff did get compensation from the state, from the county. Should he have shared any of that with Salpeter?
Well, I think that is sort of a question that was left in my mind. I don't have a good answer to that. I think everybody has to make their own decisions about that. Jay took the assignment for $5,000, a flat fee. He worked thousands of hours to turn up evidence that did, in the end, help exonerate Marty Tankleff. Marty Tankleff endured his own ordeal, 17 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, accused, charged, convicted, killing his own parents. And so the settlement, the money that he received from New York State and Suffolk County, was certainly something that he was entitled to given what he went through. Whether he did owe a debt of some kind, a reward of some kind to Jay Salpeter, I think is a question that only he can answer, and whether he felt obliged or responsible in any way, or whether he felt that perhaps there was something in their falling out that precluded him for some reason from making any kind of payment to Jay, is really something only he knows.
Now, one of the loose ends of this story, of course, is that somebody presumably got away with murder.
Yes, indeed. No one else has ever been charged in this case.
So where does that leave everything? I mean, do the police ever pursue it? Is it a cold case? Does it just disappear?
I would say yes. It's a very cold case. The case was effectively closed shortly after Marty was released from prison. No one else was ever charged. There's no indication that I found that there's any kind of active investigation. There was an alternate theory of the crime that was developed by Jay that sort of tracked with what Marty and those in his family had said immediately after the killings, that pointed to another suspect, and with through Jay's work, he sketched out a kind of a conspiracy that was behind the killings. But yeah, no one's been charged. I don't know that anybody has really. I know that Marty has always felt that there was justice still to be done, and that he had some intention of trying to make sure that the real killers were found and brought to justice. But I don't know where that stands.
It is pretty amazing. He spent 17 years in jail for a crime he apparently didn't commit. The investigator sort of went downhill in an unfortunate way, and someone out there committed a murder for which he or she never been punished. Fascinating story in the New York Times. Another story you had that affects a lot more people, more forward-looking, a fare increase on mass transit in the city. How likely is that, and how much is it going to cost us? I
don't cover transit on a regular basis enough to know whether a proposal like this is a done deal. There will be public hearings, but they're talking about raising the base fare for a single ride from $275 to $290. And that's a 5% increase. The increases will be more modest percentage-wise on weekly and monthly. I call them Metro cards. I guess a lot of people use their phone now for that, right. The Omni system. But in any case, the weekly and monthly passes. I think that it probably is likely that there will be an increase. And what the MTA has done by making the increases more modest on the bulk purchase is that they're trying to make it less painful for working people who use the subway and buses regularly, and make the occasional user, tourists for instance, pay a little bit more because it's important to the MTA and to the city that the working folks, the regular riders, stay on the subway, come back to the subway, because it is a vital element of the city.
And speaking of regular riders, where is ridership compared to pre-COVID levels?
It's about 70% on a regular basis, and there have been 4 or 5, maybe half dozen days since April where it's gotten up to about 4 million riders on a weekday, which is a lot of people, but still below below where it was pre-pandemic. If you're on the train on a regular basis, as I am, then you feel that it's more crowded than it was, a year ago.
And is that one of the reasons they have to raise the fare, to make up for that gap in ridership?
Well, that is part of it. Then there hasn't been a raise in the base fare for a number of years, but it's a tricky balancing act, because if they raise the fare too much, that will dissuade some people from riding on the system.
Of course, although considering how expensive other forms of private transportation are these days, subway is still pretty much of a bargain.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you a professional question that fascinated me. You have been a copy editor, you've been a reporter now, you have vastly improved some of the articles I've written as a copy editor. How does that work? I mean, I've always found that being an editor has improved my performance, I think, as a writer. What about you?
I would agree with that. I started in this trade as a reporter, and then shifted through various circumstances to being an editor, and was an editor for many years, and actually never really expected to go back to reporting on a regular basis. But an opportunity presented itself, and I found that coming back to reporting with a lot of editing experience helped me sort of organize a story in my head, even as I was reporting, and thinking about which elements were important to the story, and also help me focus on what's the headline of this story. And because that's often left to the editor or the copy editor to write the headline. Well, if you have a good idea of what the headline is going to be going in, that will help you sort of guide you as you're reporting and writing.
We sort of have a scarcity of copy editors these days. It was a decision made.
That's a generous thing.
Yeah, made a decision a couple of years back that we were going to sacrifice that for other jobs at the paper. How has that affected things, do you think? I mean, I have my opinion. I think things have gotten a little sloppier, and that's really unfortunate. It was a trade-off, of course, but what does a copy editor do? What is the responsibility of a copy editor? Is it tinkering? Is it fact-checking? Is it backstopping?
It's all of these things. I mean, a copy editor is really, it's quality control. And if you think about it, and for those who don't really understand maybe or know the nuances of the job function, the copy desk was actually, there were two layers there. You had your copy editor that we call the RIM, and then you had the slot editor, who was a second line of defense. And so between those two editors, looking at a story prior to publication, yes, you double checking facts, cleaning up, typos and simple grammatical errors, zeroing in on flaws in logic or structural problems. So it's a whole host of things that a copy editor does or did, and we have lost, I think, we have lost a certain level of quality control in losing the copy desk, and that was a determination that was made that we were going to sacrifice some of that.
Although, of course, we do have editors now in each department who do the editing of copy as well.
Yes.
Thanks to New York Times Metro reporter and editor Ed Shanahan for joining us. And coming up next, my thoughts on why you might be feeling low. In 1958, when the world seemed much simpler, Morris Drum from Fate, Texas won $10 in a kids' newspaper contest for asking this question: why New York City doesn't sink under the weight of all its skyscrapers. The answer, supplied by the Associated Press, couldn't have been more reassuring. Manhattan is in no danger of sinking, the news service responded, because the island, far from floating on water, rests on very sturdy bedrock. Now comes a study in the Journal of Geophysical Research that says it ain't so. The city is already vulnerable to rising sea levels caused by climate change, We got a taste of that during Hurricane Sandy. To make matters worse, it turns out that rising tides aren't the only threat. Young Morris Drum, appropriately enough from Fate, Texas, was prescient. He had reason to wonder about the bulk of the city's more than 1 million buildings. They weigh about 1.7 trillion pounds. As a result, given the growing amount of landfill, the clay and spongy ground outside Manhattan, and natural flaws in the bedrock that only undergirds Midtown and downtown, the city is sinking. Not by much, but it doesn't take much. On average, the weight of those buildings is compressing the earth by between 1 and 4 millimeters a year. 4 is 3/20ths of an inch. Buildings are fixtures in the cityscape. They weigh the most. But don't forget all the cars and trucks and sidewalks and roadways and people. The 4 million or so people who inhabit Manhattan on an average workday weigh more than 350,000 tons, or about the equivalent of the Empire State Building. Now, you may already be doing your part to save the planet by recycling, by pursuing other environmentally sound strategies, but that might no longer be good enough. Now, according to this new study, you've got another reason to feel guilty every time you eat dessert. For the New York Times and CUNY TV, I'm Sam Roberts.